This is the 8-9 Combo Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay and Harry Jones. The first part of the international season is already behind us.
How's it, Brett? Or should I say, how zit with a hyphen in it, because rugby is now the undisputed leader in sport of hyphenated names. It used to be our nemesis, the All Blacks, yours and mine, with all their dashes and dots. Imagine if Anton Leonard-Brown's mom had married Beauden Barrett's dad, and you would have these four brothers playing for the All Blacks called Leonard Brown, Barrett Brown. But now, South Africa is getting into the act with Ben Jason, Peter Steff, Jan Hendrik, and Kurt Lee.
Yes.
Enough, no?
That's before we get into Feinberg Imbazella, and I've butchered that already. I'm sorry.
Ngomazulu. Just do that.
Sasha.
Just like with Pacific Island players, guys, it's like making every sound count. So you go, and then Gomez Zulu.
I will get better at that before the year is out, because I'm going to need to be. We are 24 episodes into the 8-9 Combo, a rugby podcast, and thanks so much for bringing us into your rugby week. So let's rip it out down the short side for another week, mate, with cheers and jeers. And I'm going to start with a cheers for you for our pod mate, Harry Wilson. And I'm just,
yes,
I said to you on Saturday night in the post-mortem that I was really happy for him. And I watched it back again on Sunday, and he had such a good game. And for someone who hadn't played a test for a couple of years, would have had doubts in his mind whether he can still fit at this level, he just had an absolute stormer. And, you know, like, aside from friend of the pod and all that business, it was just so good to see. I'm just so happy for him.
I agree. He is an aware bear. He's a bear with a map in his head. I thought there was spatial awareness there that was kind of lacking, that link ability. That time when he took that pass from Fraser McRae on the run, I thought that was, it had the look of it would fizzle out, and he just kept it going with that quick pass back. Really smart.
Yes, it was. No, it was good to see. Jeers. Who are we jeering?
I protest and I jeer all those who say I'm getting ahead of myself and getting too hectic when I say that Sasha Feinberg Ngomozulu #- will definitely change rugby forever, or as Hugh Bladen might have said. Remember Hugh Bladen?
Yeah.
Such a player, such a man, Sasha Boots, Sasha Boyke, Sasha Stormer he was the dancer, the prancer, the midnight bajancer, and SFM is your channel to greatness. He put the cabbage back in the Irish roll, he drank the port out of the geese, and he will be World Rugby's World Player of the Year. Prepare for something amazing, Australia.
Okay, I'm just going to mark this one down. We'll just play this one later in the year.
Incredible overreaction, I know. For beating Portugal.
Oh, yeah. Look, Australia's won 4 in a row, mate. So I'm all for overreactions.
What do you say? You called your team the world leaders because of the longest streak in Tier 1.
World leading Wallabies, exactly right. We've enjoyed a lot, in fact, a couple of returning guests in recent weeks. But this week, we're heading back to someone completely new for us, and not just new for the 8-9 Combo, new to Brett and Harry Podcast Inc. as well. Our newest of new guests join us next. Right now, in fact.
Music.
Adding him to stage. Here we go. It's another one of those weeks where Harry's really excited about our guest, and he really, really wants to do the intro again. And I know he's serious because he's offered to share travel budget with me. So off you go, mate.
And some percentage. Brett, let's be serious. This is the artistic episode. Shakespeare, Seinfeld, Sopranos. What do they have in common? What are they about? Well, Seinfeld's about nothing, so we can put that off the list.
So Sopranos is not about nothing.
But you can enjoy each act for parallel reasons. At base, the body filth of the bard. At mid-range, the clever wordplay, the murder. At highest level of Shakespeare is, what is this life? And why are we here? And are we alone? In Seinfeld, again, that was about nothing. But hey, calm down. Keep your puffy shirt on. Seinfeld was Kramer falling down. No, it was about how we deal with loneliness. Or no, it was, is this city going to continue on? Sopranos was strippers and gangsters getting whacked, but no, it was a study of the early 2000s, but no, it was how to transmit values from one generation to the next. Rugby has its first entry into this great canon of art Chasing the Sun, the first one, explored how a team with one late try scored from a movement by 4 guys who would never have been allowed to play together in the old days. Peter Steph Toy, the Malmesbury Missile, the boy from Kryfontaine, Cheston Colby, Malcolm Marks, English speaker from Josie, and Lacanio, the Eastern Province guy. Then the guy had to make another sequel. You know how hard it is to make a sequel that works when the first one was good? Because South Africa was spellbound for every episode of Chasing the Sun. Chasing the Sun 2 is the best sequel ever made in cinematography. It is the best rugby documentary by far. It was a tougher job. It had to top the first one without doing the same themes. Rugby Pass is about to release it, guys, and it's free. You just got to sign up. But the pathos, the pain, the comedy, the unlikely heroes, Franz Maherber saying, but they've got good big oaks too, eh? That kind of thing. Felix, Willie, Ox, the crew, all will make you laugh and cry in a hyphenated way. And we have today with us the storyteller, the man, our first executive producer, probably our first director. Have we ever had a director before? I'm not sure.
Don't think so.
The maker, the force behind the remarkable 5-part series, which spellbound All the Republic and also has captivated the best pundits of rugby. Welcome, Gareth, the director, Whittaker.
Well, that's just
Harry.
That's just
Wow,
What
what
are-
standing
what-
ovation.
What are the chances of coordinating one of these every morning before I go to work?
I'll be your
Well, you
coffee.
could come to my house. You could come to my house. Well, we've got oats and good coffee, and you could just give me a sort of a morning chat before I leave.
I'm your self-esteem millipop, baby.
yeah.
Mate, that was a work of art.
That was
thank
good.
you.
That was good.
Appreciate
That was a
I would.
work.
I'm exhausted.
My
I'm done.
ego is expanding.
Ekis bong, make a plan.
And sadly, Gareth, that's all we've got time for. Thanks so much. We'll try and catch you again later in the year.
the perils of
That
editing.
was wonderful, and I'm grateful for your time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we thank you so much. Good luck with Chasing the Sun 3. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
It does bring up a good question, though, Gareth, about editing. You know, everyone watching these series thinks like it's obvious that you are very comfortable with each other. Ox was on here saying you just forget that the guy's actually making a movie, right? So that takes a lot of hours. What was the ratio of how many hours hit the cutting floor to how many, to the actual 5-part series?
Good question. I've got a follow up here too.
Yeah.
It is a great question. I don't know, but I'll guess. I reckon the ratio is probably 50-1.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah, right. Right.
Maybe more. Maybe more.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
Huge.
So
Yeah.
so my follow up there, Gareth, then is for every minute that we saw across the 10 episodes across the 2 series, how much time editing do you think for that 1 minute of footage?
It's probably more than ours.
Have a guess. Tell me what you would guess. I'm interested.
Well, I had a bit of background in news for a few years, and the golden rule in news was that for every minute of a story, it was about an hour edit time. And I can imagine for a doco like yours, it's probably
No,
it might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour. I don't know.
I reckon 25 to 50 hours per minute.
Yeah.
Per minute.
crazy.
Yeah,
It's
wow.
wild.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
but what you've got to remember with a story like this is it completely, the edit process is the process. And that isn't to undermine how critically important the guys who are in the camp and Russell, who are a filmmaker in the camp, that's not underestimating the importance of their role. But the story and the creative process is all edit. We do some writing before we begin, but even that is often proven to be incorrect because you're writing what you think is happening.
Yeah. And then Malcolm Marks goes down. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then exactly. So you build different scenario sets, so you prepped. But then once you start cutting, that's the thing. And what we've learned in this process is that you got to make. So we would also, when you talk about the ratio of cutting room floor to finished art, maybe the more interesting ratio is how many fully created minutes don't make it. And I reckon that's probably even 3 or 4 to 1. So we will generate storylines which are finished. Like we could put them on air tomorrow, but don't make the final series.
That's actually very interesting. My question was along those lines of storyboarding. You know, you're trying to storyboard a plot that doesn't exist yet. You have contingencies. You build it around people. You go, my most, verbal people. Like Six Nations thing, it was a dud because you had, Stuart Hogg, who was a dous, and then you have Joe Marler doing his stuff. It's kind of old and tired. I thought Chasing the Sun explored people who aren't normally on the camera, and so you saw people who are extremely authentic. A guy from the farm who's not really gonna be talking that much, but you don't know. The worst moment is that sound of Marks. The best moment is Peter Steph Toy saying, "Is here bang? Are you done? Tell us ons maak 'n plan." That is unless you grew up around that and understand the understated violence of that statement of saying, "Are you tired? We'll make a plan." It's hard to know. Even Rassie said he had no idea that was coming because Peter Steph never talks. So, it's like you're making a story that it's not written yet, but you have to have backups because what if the Boks had lost to the French?
Yeah, so during the filming process, we had 3 parallel production plans. Obviously, we always knew that we'd win the World Cup.
Yes.
But we actually had plans in place. What does the story look like if we go out in the quarters? What does the story look like if we go out in the semis? Because just from a pure, I think of it as maths, right? From a pure minutes of game usage as part of your storytelling mix, if we go out in the quarters, we don't have the semi-final or the final game. But we still have the same deliverable as in a 5-episode series.
Exactly.
So we were running these different things in parallel, and so you cannot even imagine. You guys were nervous in those 1-pointers. There was a team of people in Joburg who were paralyzed by nerves.
Beyond nervous, yeah.
I tell you what one doesn't want to do is make a documentary series about a team that you deeply, deeply love who didn't win.
Yeah.
And equally, world.
Yeah, true. Equally, Gareth, you don't want to go back to your networks and just your distributors and go, oh, by the way, this series is only going to be 4 episodes now.
No, well, exactly.
Not possible.
Yeah.
And so we'll call the scenario where they go out on the quarters the Irish lullaby plot. So in that scenario, did you have to have more stuff around place and people because plot's more about the game, and then you could have an interesting subplot about a guy. No,
that's exactly right, Harry. And what I do fundamentally believe is the Springboks matter greatly in South Africa. What the Springbok team has taught us as people and as a country as to who we can be, and that South Africans really can be the best in the world. And that goes well beyond rugby. And it's such an important message that if we had lost in the quarterfinals, that message would have perhaps been even more important, because the depth of the relationship with our team can't be a win or lose depth. It's got to have more to it, right? You can't only love someone when they're wonderful. You've got to love them when in times of difficulty. And the exact scenario there was get into the lives of the people more, understand what moves them, understand their disappointment. We're actually going to be quite differently structured. It was going to be set post World Cup as opposed to being there within the World Cup. And it was going to be set post World Cup with people reflecting on the disappointment and the loss, and then looking forward to what the future would be. It would have been good as well.
Yeah. That's interesting. You've just going back to an earlier point there. You said you've got 3 or 4 separate storylines ready to air. We had a question about when do we get the director's cut DVD box set. It sounds like you've got that ready to go.
No.
That's a good answer. I think it's a bad idea. Keep your brand.
I think it's, we all, the whole team, from the team at SuperSport, all of us here, and our commercial partners and Betway and Spur and Toyota, we just love it. I don't want to change it. We think it's special. So
it's phenomenal. I wanted to go.
I wanted to come back, Harry. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to come back to answer your question, well, sort of more your statement about the kinds of people talking and not having these perfectly media trained people, and some of the heroes being these kind of, I don't know how you would say it, but not like perfectly expressive people.
Yeah.
What makes these documentaries really, really work is when they are authentic in representing the human being.
Yeah.
And not everyone speaks like a head boy. In fact, most of the people I know don't speak like a head boy. And I think the media industry and media training has taken so many people down the same line where you get the same bullshit cliched answers. You know,
one game at a time.
One game at a time. All of this shit. I mean, one of my favorite. France was, I think, my favorite interview in Chasing the Sun too. I just thought he was wonderful. He's a combination of funny and he's just cool, right?
Yeah.
Peter Steff as well, and I think that's the public responds so well to just the person. We don't care. In our normal life, we stumble over our words. We struggle to find the right word. We then get an idea across. Not everyone is this perfectly formed media personality. And truthfully, it makes for better documentary.
I think that's why the Six Nations fell down, is each team sort of nominated their guy, and so they ended up having, it was the people you'd expect. They're never going to say anything wrong. The Irish are very careful to cultivate their image. We had France on in our pod, and he actually shared with Brett and I something interesting, which is he wasn't even sure he'd play rugby. To speak to your reluctant, innocent, raw kind of farmer guy, is he wasn't even sure it was a thing to do, playing with a ball, running around. It's kind of silly. And I think that sounds like
something I should just do on a Saturday and nothing else. Yeah,
and it came through, I think, in Chasing the Sun that you had this incredible mix. I think for the outside world, they hadn't really factored with, what makes the Rainbow Nation so rainbowy. What are the actual strands? So when you sat down with Rassie, he was obviously the most provocative, the brilliant, sort of misunderstood, clear, confusing, humble, vain, wild, wrong, right guy. He's like everything. He's like a big bundle of everything. He has all the flaws you love in a big, sort of wild man. Coming away from that, what was your sense of him? Is he just one of those driven genius types? Is he someone who's trying to grow? What was your big takeaway from when the guy who opens the whole series with, "You lied. You promised me you would get no penalties and you lied to me"?
Yeah. So I suppose there's two parts to the answer. The first sort of part is how I perceived the way he came across on the show, and then the second part is how I perceived knowing him.
Yeah.
On the starting with the second one, Rassie is a deeply, deeply passionate rugby man. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. There will be bits that I'll remember that I'll tell you about that I can't even remember if they're in the show or not. You never know whether they made it. But he sort of spoke at one point to us on camera and said, I don't know the answer to how to save South Africa or how to create hope or all of this. What I know is rugby teams, and I know how to make them work. And I know when they're not working, and I know what to do, and I know what to study, and I know what to watch for, and I know the kind of people I want in my rugby team. And I think that came across in the show a lot, but it certainly came across in meeting him. He loves rugby.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah.
Over the 4 or 8 or 6 year journey or whatever it was through the two Chasing the Suns, what I think Rassie has become very aware of is it, and when I say aware of, perhaps he knew this anyway, but is the staggering power that rugby has in our society in South Africa to make a positive and hopeful impact, and perhaps that's his sort of transformation. I remember right in the beginning of Chasing the Sun 1, when talking about what wins rugby matches, and the Boks at that stage before we got to Japan, it was more like bench presses and tackle practice win World Cups, not hope. But the team itself went through a transition. You know, it started in Chasing the Sun 1 with Mapimpi pointing at Uyunene had written her name on his armband, and the country then sort of took this, you know, held the Springboks up to a higher standard and made them represent more. And I think most of the Boks then went on this journey with a great understanding of what it means. So, you know, Rassie, the other part of him is he comes across incredibly authentically on TV. You know, he's not trying to be someone different. He is Rassie. And he's a genius who's given a huge amount to our country, and he's really good on TV.
Yes, he is. Gareth, I wanted to go right back to the start, and you mentioned the first Chasing the Sun there. That came out in 2020, and obviously it finishes with the Boks winning in Japan in 2019, but it starts several years before it, doesn't it? It's 2016, 2017 starts. So when did the pitch for a 5-episode documentary series like that start? And how hard did you have to work back then? And we're talking 10 years ago, I'm guessing you're going to say, to get that idea up.
Yeah, so the guy who films with the Springboks, a guy called Russell Belter, and he's been filming with the Boks for yonks. I don't know, 15 years or something, maybe 10 years. I'm not sure the exact time. I mean, he's been within the Springbok camp for yonks. Pre-20, and this is quite a long-ish story, so I'll try to tell it and I'll get to answering your question. But pre-2019, the guys at SuperSport, Mark Jury and a few others at SuperSport, saw that something was happening. For me, it started when Sia ran out as captain for the first time. And we kind of looked at each other from an SA Rugby, a SuperSport, and from T&W, my business, and said, something is happening here. We've got to make sure we're filming at the World Cup. I don't think any of us had visualized a 5-part documentary series telling the story of the Springbok World Cup journey.
Righto.
Until we won the final. And then walked out. I live in Craighall Park, went down to 4th Avenue in Parkhurst, which was just a throng of thousands and thousands of people. Had an incredible night, as I'm sure you can imagine. Woke up the next morning with a sore head, and we started cutting a trailer. Said, we now know what this is going to be, and we started cutting a trailer, and then started shopping that trailer that day.
Newsflash, Chasing the Sun was born in Babalas. It was a hangover idea.
Right, listen, with the rest of the country. And so then we started building it. What we then realized and the team at SuperSport, they saw it pretty quickly. So it wasn't a super challenging thing.
Hard sell,
to get them to buy into. But then as we started developing the story, what you realize is that this story didn't begin in 2019. The story began in 2015. And so we had to go all the way back. And that really was about two things. And for me, this all comes down to the same lesson. This country can be a country of world champions business people, world champion artists, world champion rugby players, world champion scientists, world champion politicians. In about 2016, the then CEO of SuperSport, Imtiaz Patel, and Yuri Roo, the then CEO of SA Rugby, met and decided that what they needed to do was invest time, money, expertise in committing to making the Springbok rugby team world champions. And so you had to go back to understand that. And then the story goes that we were horrific. We were horrific. We were number 7 in the world. But in all this journey, understood that our intention was world champions. And so that's why it ended up back there.
It's very interesting for Australian viewers and listeners, because that's exactly where Australia sits right now, having gone through, the most horrific year, and now sort of 7th, 8th in the world-ish, whatever. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And
which was documented. as well.
But like
in
the
itself,
idea, but the idea, obviously, Australia does have world class, lots of things. But the idea of rugby being a lag, and so my question is this: could you do a Chasing the Sun? It would be a different name, maybe a different phrase, but could you do a Chasing the Sun for other countries in rugby? Because rugby's in sore need of telling its own story.
Yes.
In authentic ways, that it's not just prepackaged BS that's kind of boring.
Harry, absolutely. That's definitely part of the plan. So what we have been overwhelmed by is how much love this show has gotten. And we think it's gotten a lot of love because it is it's really truthful to the beauty of the game that we love, and that it taps into the essence of what makes this country good. And so that's something we are on a mission to do for other countries, for other sports, and that's kind of our mission at the moment in life.
Yeah. So was the second series then easier to pitch, or was it actually harder to pitch because of how well the first one went?
No, it was pretty easy to pitch. Because the first one was iconic. The first one, the time at which the first one happened was remarkable. We launched, I think the first episode, or the last episode launched 1 year anniversary of the World Cup when we'd just come through COVID. But at that time, the only real example of really good sporting documentary was Last Dance. And so Last Dance and Chasing the Sun 1 kind of launched. Yeah, they started the tidal wave of sports documentary, and then Drive to Survive and all of these things followed it. So pitching the second one wasn't that difficult.
No, I'm glad you mentioned Drive to Survive, because the first Chasing the Sun would have been very early Drive to Survive days. Yeah. So did the emergence of that sort of style of in your face storytelling like you've done and like you've done so well, it must just open doors everywhere you walk now.
It does. It does. What the emergence really did for us in the beginning, because Chasing the Sun 1 was the first TV program I made.
Yeah, right.
So it was my debut. What we had though is we had really great American storytelling to learn from. And so there's a show that you've probably heard of now because it's gone into football, called All or Nothing. But where All or Nothing started was in the NFL. And there were sort of 6 seasons of All or Nothing before we made Chasing the Sun. And I watched each of those series 4 or 5 times. I dissected every ingredient, from music to editing style to storylines to narrative structure to how they do it to what's good to what's not good. Kind of teach myself how to do it. Yeah. Not that I figured out, not that it was then easy, but yeah.
Yeah. So I can imagine thinking about it logistically, and again, because I've had a little bit of experience in this area, you must have an extraordinary team of catalogers and markers and researchers who when you say, it'd be good if we had footage of this try in this game 2 years ago, and they go, yep, we've got it. Here you go. How many angles do you want?
Yeah.
And the amount of time that they must have put into it would have been incredible.
Yeah, so you don't do much editing for the first 3 or 4 months.
No, you're just piecing together what you got. Yeah.
3 months, it's getting your shit together so that when we are sitting in deep storyland and someone says, "Oh, I'd love to hear what Peter Steff thinks of this moment," that we've got it clipped and marked and we can go and get it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a challenge in some ways, because rugby players are not, the sort of NBA players that are used to doing swag and marketing a brand. There's an essential reticence and shyness to some of the players. Some of them, are not worldly. They're not cosmopolitan. The same would be true in Australia, by the way. There's some people who are just sort of Pacific Island boys, come up in Melbourne, kind of close-knit family, somewhat religious. And I think
really quiet by nature.
Why I like Chasing the Sun 2 more was I thought you brought more it was more confident filmmaking. It was more evocative. You took a chance by having a scrum episode. No one else does that. And boy, I mean, rugby's in sore need of elevating its set pieces and its oddities and its idiosyncrasies, and stop being ashamed of them and say, the scrum is taking too long. Like, let's find out about the scrum. What was that decision making around? Is that rugby? Well, there's some really hardcore rugby people on your team that were saying we've got to make people love the scrum again.
We try to build the team with enough diversity of really hardcore rugby people and some people who don't understand rugby and who are just really.
That's good too. That's important too.
Yeah, which is important, right? I mean, we said all the time, like we spoke a lot about my mum, and would my mum get this? You know, would my mum find this interesting? So when the fucking heavy rugby nerds are saying we need to go down, cool, but my mum must also understand it.
So, which is exactly what we see. I mean, how many people do you know who say, I don't care about Formula One, but I watch Drive to Survive every week?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then again, the scrum was the authentic moment in that episode. Yeah. But in order to understand why it was this watershed moment, you got to understand what happens and how it all works, and you got to understand. I was so proud. I was so proud of that episode because I think it took bravery. Like storytelling bravery to like dial into the nerdiness, but in such a way that you didn't isolate or exclude people who don't understand the nerdiness.
Was Don Human the surprise star because scrum cap on, talking about sailing the ship into the harbor? Yeah, he's into the harbor and that famous sign of like, I never saw a scrum machine in the game. Why would I use a scrum machine?
It's a great line. This is where. How far into the process did you realise that your team of rugby nerds were actually all ex-front rowers, and they were just we've just got to get a scrum episode in there?
I don't think we had any front rowers.
No, you've got heaps. They just haven't admitted it.
Everyone ends up as a prop anyway, Gareth. It's okay.
Yeah. But the best thing about that was that you had props and front rowers explaining it, and they explained it so well. And Harry, I'm sure I've told you about sitting down for a coffee with Dan Palmer, and it ended up being 3 coffees because we spoke for about an hour and a half, and we were moving salt and pepper shakers on a table, and you want this angle to counter this angle. And when you get into that sort of conversation with a front rower, it is absolutely fascinating, and that came through, Gareth, in that episode. It was just so good to watch.
And it's a thing, I think, for rugby, right? The more you know about sport, the better it gets. No doubt. The more you know, the better it gets. And rugby, we haven't done a great sales job on. I mean, scrumming, we haven't done a great sales job on. But it's beautiful. And I hope we've made a small impact there.
I'm not going to say it's beautiful, but it's pretty good.
There's a strange and heaving and awful beauty about it. It's like it's the most poetic part of rugby. And I think it's the most iconic looking too, like an actual form scrum.
Totally, it's fundamental to the game, right?
For all the nuts, it's why we have our numbers exactly how we have them. We literally start from the scrum, And when phase play happens, everyone's different. I cried several times watching this thing. I imagine all of South Africa cried. I actually have heard from people who have nothing to do with South Africa. They're from Ireland, they're from England, who also shed a tear. So, not to be like get into the craft of making a film, but is that something that you try to get? Is it just the way it was? Is it just because this is such an emotional thing? All the nuts are on the line. It's for all the marbles.
Look, I found Chasing the Sun one way more emotional, I think, from a storyline point of view. We probably did try to make you cry. We probably did. I mean, I remember watching the first episode of Chasing the Sun. Yeah, right in this boardroom where we are now, and we had our commissioning editor, we had the CEO of SuperSport and of DSTV, and Mark, who's the CEO, but he's also a wonderful storyteller. Sort of said, it's not emotional enough. You got to turn up the emotion.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, and then we went away and we turned up the emotion. I kind of always knew once we got into the 1-point games that it would you know.
Yeah.
But you know what
I know
it is?
people
I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't perceive what it feels like outside of the country, but from within the country, and I think this came across in the storyline, but we just needed a good news story.
Yeah.
You know, and it's everyone's. It belongs to everyone. And when I say we, I mean South Africans and friends of South Africa, you know, and people around the world who have
the diaspora,
some kind of love for this crazy place, so that when you can just deliver the beauty of that happening, I think it does. It touches you emotionally because you feel so deeply wanting it to work, wanting this place to work, and when you see that happening on film, it just pushes you over.
Let me give you the external view then, Gareth, for what it's worth. The best compliment I can give it is that by episode 3, probably, it didn't matter that I was watching a documentary about the Springboks. They just happened to be the team that was involved. But ultimately, it was a story about, the beauty of rugby, but the power of support and camaraderie and love, and what that does, not just in your team, but how that affects your community, your province, your state, your country. And
it's universal.
It's a phenomenal. It is. It doesn't matter who you support, what team you watch. You can get that out of watching this series. And I don't just say that because we're talking to the director and the producer. It is just a phenomenal piece of storytelling, full stop.
Well, that's why I'm going to go back to my beautiful, amazing, genius intro, which is that people can like it for different reasons. I'll tell you, Gareth, what made me cry was the old Lions. Like watching a guy like Dwayne Vermeulen, that classic scene where Rassie figures out that he has to get Eben and Dwayne in a room and hash it out. I love that stuff. And then Dwayne coming out, and you can tell now he's coaching. So it's interesting. It's even more interesting now that he actually ends up coaching with Rassie. But winning over that guy, knowing at that moment, now the team's together. I think that's so classic in a family dynamics, business, whatever you want to talk about. Sometimes you get the two guys that are the most, senior or the big dogs, and say, don't come out of the room until you're friends.
Yeah, Rassie. I remember Rassie told me anecdotally, because I've always admired learning about the team and then applying it to business, or applying it to my teams and how to run we had lots of that shit in making this, right? So there's probably 30 people in the post-production process. So you're running a team, and some days the guys are good and some days they're not good, and eventually there's no scorecard at the end, and you got to manage egos, and you got to manage all of these things, right? And what I loved about that scene, Harry and Rassie, I remember Rassie said, I think people from the outside think everything's perfect. And he was like, no ways, man. How could it be? It's impossible. It's a collection of human beings. Mm-hmm. And human beings are like, we're imperfect. It could never be perfect. Mm-hmm. And people are like, whinging about a shirt not fitting. And you think everything's perfect, but it wouldn't be. But what he does so well is he just talks about it. He addresses it. He almost destigmatizes conflict and addressing difficult things. And it's a cool lesson on life.
No, right? It's true.
I love how you play families and businesses, and part of the thing with social media is that guys are posting photos of themselves on Instagram with perfect filters, and so you think everything's easy, but it's not really what it's about.
And it still takes them 15 minutes to make that post, doesn't it?
That's what it takes. Yeah, the good, all the bad things about Rassie are also the good things. The bad things is that he doesn't have a filter sometimes. Then he, sometimes says too much. But that's also probably why, in a team with him, you would love him, because you know exactly where you stand. I've heard stories from players telling me specifically, like, he took me aside and he told me why he didn't pick me. He told me there were 3 things I should work on. This is what Joe Schmidt does too, by the way. And all the good coaches do this, but Rassie's very good at telling you exactly what to do. You need to hit more rucks. I want to see you up off the ground quicker, and I want you to cut this, 2 kgs or add 2 kgs. Just all in all, though, when you look at it now, how ready are you to jump into Chasing the Sun 3 or whatever the next thing is? What's the next project you have waiting for you?
We got lots of wonderful and exciting projects on the go. We've just launched a sort of a direct to customer sort of media business called Smash Sports, which has got some epic programming. We've got a cool talk show with Sean de Villiers and Nick Rabinovitz and Skulk Burgers on at the moment. So Smash Sports is really cool. We're building that. We're kind of doing rugby content, football content, and more to come. We got some nice shows coming up for the Oz series. So we got Matt Pierce, who's going to be in country doing some podcasts and shows. You guys should try hook up with Matty while he's there.
I was only thinking about that over the weekend, actually, that we should absolutely try and hook up with Matt Pierce.
Yeah, you really should.
That's your homework, Harry.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll connect you with pleasure.
Gareth, you want to make a show
we're doing it behind it.
Yeah, you want to make a show about an aging number 8 and a grizzly number 8 who's a rogue who goes around the world and messes things up and then fixes them, and then a stay-at-home really good family man number 9 that's in Canberra and this unlikely odd fellow. Yeah, I think it'd be great. Yeah.
The
pitch.
The shooting budget, the technical budget, is going to be eye-watering, Gareth. You won't believe it.
Yeah, try to up with me.
We have to probably double up with some makeup, like sort of 2 or 3 makeup people and some stylists and those sort of things.
I'm not sure they'll be able to do it. How important? I mean, it's the reception for it in South Africa was phenomenal, but and that I think fed the demand outside South Africa, and it was a big step when Rugby Pass TV took on the first series. That happened earlier this year, but the news over the weekend is that Chasing the Sun 2 is going to come to Rugby Pass TV in the next month or so as well.
Yeah,
that's just going to send this story to another level, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think rugby people around the world will love it, and maybe the audience comes at it from a level of being inquisitive about the Springboks. But as you said there, Brett, I think once you've sat down for 10 minutes, you realize that this isn't really a Springbok story. It's a human story and it's a people story, and it's just a cool documentary. And that happens to feature the Boks. And so I think people will love it. And I think it's so important that it goes around the world. It's a good story about something wonderful, and the world needs more of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Did you naturally form connections with the players and the coaches and all that over the years to the point? And I'm thinking of my own experience here now. You cover a team for long enough, and you naturally start you're barracking for their success. It doesn't almost matter who they're playing for, but you want your mates to do well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course you do. Of course you do. And so, remember our team there were lots of guys involved in it. And so different people will have formed different connections with different players and or coaches over the time. And that's important. But the more you learn about someone, the more you want their success. I was in Paris as the final whistle went, and I just, there was a famous image of another guy, but I just slumped into my chair and sobbed for 10 minutes. And I was with one of my great mates who I also work with, Jack, and he kept pulling me up, saying, "You've got to watch this." But I was fucking drained, physically finished. But I think it's because you've invested so much in hoping for their success, right?
Yeah, Gareth, there were people around me. I was actually put down right next to Stacey and Banambi in that crowd with next to Malcolm Marx's people. And I would tell you right now, there were 3 or 4 people who couldn't watch the final 10 minutes. They sat behind us. We were all standing. We never sat down. They were sitting down, closed eyes, praying. That was the feeling. That was the vibe. I don't even want to watch the final scrum. It was like Cheslin Colby. Everyone was Cheslin Colby going, "I don't want to see what happens."
Harry, I don't know if you had this experience, but I was like manically looking at the scoreboard.
Yeah.
And I kept asking the guy next to me, "It's us that's one ahead. Hey, it's us that's one ahead." And I don't know.
I knew we were ahead, but I was the time. I was like, "Go, time, go."
I kept needing to. We've got 12, right? We've got 12. I kept needing to confirm it. I don't know.
Right. Funny. That's fascinating. What's the future of sports docos now, Gareth? Do you think it's changed so much since you mentioned The Last Dance, which was obviously largely archival footage. Then Chasing the Sun comes along, Drive to Survive comes along, and now it seems as sports fans we're absolutely blessed with documentary content to the point that it's actually hard to keep up now. I really enjoyed Full Swing, the PGA series last year. I'm getting reminders weekly now that, you still haven't started watching Full Swing 2. Yeah, I'll get to it, Netflix. Just there's too much on. So where are we heading now? What's going to be the next big shift?
Well, it's going to be ubiquitous. Every single sport, every single federation, it will be there, right?
Yeah.
What needs to happen is we need to lean into the authentic storytelling far, far more. I think that's what sets Chasing the Sun apart.
I agree.
Authentic, not manufactured, right?
Yeah.
So the more we manufacture, the more like bubblegum, Kardashians, sort of TV programming it will become. And that's not a bad thing. Of course, the Kardashians TV programming is a great business. And there will be that. But the authentic stuff's the stuff that's going to connect with the heart of the fans, which is going to in turn improve the watchability of the live product, and that cycle will just continue. And so that will happen. By the way, Brett, if you've enjoyed Full Swing, we're busy working with the Stingers, the South African live golf team, to produce
righto.
And it's going to be very special. A good group of human beings. We're filming now at the moment.
Yeah, great. I look forward to that.
No, I think the public always knows, Brett. I always think in the end there's this stacked, schedule, but in the end a few things leap out: Sopranos, Seinfeld, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
And I think it's because it addresses more of the human condition. I mean, when you see the coaches, the Boks, ripping apart tactics and selection, you have Felix Jones going to war with Rassie, and you can tell that these guys, the reason why they won was because there was no sacred cows. Everyone could discuss everything, and I thought that was the most for the rugby nerds. It was interesting to see how they put together the 7-1, the 6-2, why, how it worked. I think there's plenty there. Everyone can like it for different reasons. Gareth's mom can like it because Malcolm's cute.
Yeah, Gareth, I've got one question for you before we let you go. How many times did you? And I'm going to preface this by saying this is going to be a terrible South African accent, and there will be some profanity coming here.
Yeah, let's go.
How many times did you watch Rassie say, "You're all a bunch of fucking liars," before you realised that is the first minute of
liars?
How many times did you watch that, or how few times did you watch that before you thought that is the series opener?
So, Brett, you'll enjoy this story. When we started making the first Chasing the Sun, and I did two things actually, as I watched every single minute of All or Nothing and deconstructed it. And then I reached out to the producer and director of the test, the guys that followed the Aussie cricket team.
Yeah.
And just asked him for some advice. I'd never met him. He was super generous with his time, and I said, I don't know how to make a TV show. Can you please teach me in the next 30 minutes over Zoom? Which he was very happy to do.
It's easy. You just start like this.
You just do this, and this. But the one story that he told me that really stuck with me is he said, in making the test, and I'm sure you wouldn't mind me telling the story, in making the test, when Amazon signed up to the test, they had a rule, and their rule was you start the series with the most impactful moment and you end it with the second most impactful. And it picked itself, to be honest. I watched it once and we agreed that would be the start of the series. You start with the most impactful moments.
Yeah. I sat there just going, holy shit.
I do love a conversation that starts with, you a fucking liar, and then it ends with, let's get a vibe.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. Gareth, look, this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been so good to get into the real nuts and bolts of this. We love having great conversations and great rugby chats every week, we say, but this has just been an extraordinary chat. We thank you so much for giving up some time for us.
Oh, boys, listen, thank you. And just thank you for telling the story of rugby and spreading the game. It's a very special game, and I'm grateful to what you guys do. So thank you so much.
Cheers, man. The lifelong love. Hey,
This is the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones, and that, mate, was an absolutely fascinating, not necessarily always rugby chat. Phenomenal with Gareth.
I knew you would like that. Geez, that was fun. But it also, I know you would like it because it sort of unites two or three things that you actually really do love. You know, the actual making of something, the creating of something, the how of it is interesting. What a great fellow too, and what a credit to his country and to his family that he could make something on his first attempt. Like, I'm like, dude, you need to do more things because everything you do turns to gold.
Yeah, and at some point down the track, he's going to have this long and distinguished career of sports documentary making. He's going to go, yeah, but geez, it started well. like trying to do that every time, trying to reach that level every time. It's going to be going to be great. But as we mentioned, chasing the sun, particularly for our listeners and viewers on YouTube in Australia, particularly. Chasing the Sun is on Rugby Pass TV now. You can sign up for that for free. And Chasing the Sun 2 is coming to Rugby Pass TV in the next month or so. So sign up now for free. Get watching the first one, and be ready for the second series when it drops soon. It will definitely be worth watching for sure. We'll head around the grounds a little bit, mate. Touch on a few things from the weekend. A little Test rugby recap, if you like. The weekend started on Friday again. Spain beat Tonga in Nuku'alofa 29-20. And Spain is a great article, and I wish I didn't think of this immediately now, and now I can't think who wrote it. There's a great article in one of the British papers describing Spain as the rising power in European rugby now. And it's actually a really, really good article. If I could describe it better, I would tell people to go and find it.
I think this is right. Wasn't Spain a qualifier for the World Cup, but for some sort of
they lost out. Yes, they were disqualified during the qualification process for fielding an ineligible
player. So I mentioned that
just
because they really are kind of arrived in that sort of top 20 group, and
and
great.
Everything that we loved about Portugal, Spain is starting to do as well. So it's
also nice
fantastic.
because they have a built-in rival, with Spain and Portugal being Iberian Peninsula rivals, and you know how that does.
Absolutely.
If you have a close rival who's good, and that'll always make you better.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then they both just want to beat France at some point. Queensland hosted Wales in Brisbane last weekend. Wales got away 36-35, and that was a fantastic game of rugby on Friday night. New Zealand 47 beat Fiji in San Diego on Friday night, Saturday morning in our part of the world. That was followed by Australia 40 beating Georgia 29 in Sydney. Japan, the Eddie Jones era, the second coming or the third coming of Eddie Jones in Japan has not gone well at all. They were beaten by Italy 25-23 in Osaka, and in Italy have had a pretty decent tour down here. South Africa obviously beat Portugal in Bloemfontein 64-21. Scotland continued their winning ways in South America, beating Chile 52-11 in Santiago. Argentina thumped Uruguay in Maldonado 79-5. And I buggered up the Japan score before. 42-14, Italy won. I think I read last week's score against Georgia out again. So Italy have had it finish with a good couple of results down this way. What were your couple of days later? What were your key takeaways from we'll call them the Tri-Nations tests?
Yeah, I confess I only watched those three really in depth at all. I think there's something to be gained. For those who say, no, you cannot really, tell much from a walkover, 6 tries for Australia, 7 for New Zealand, 10 for South Africa. I think you can, because it's actually interesting when you do get the line breaks. Line breaks 14, 7, 13 across the board. Defenders beaten, 50 for New Zealand, 40 for South Africa, 20 for... I think that's good to see what you would do in space. I think it's good to have those eventualities. Will you get 7 of them against Ireland? No, but if you get 2 and you've practiced how to finish and you don't panic and you keep your poise, that's good. Also, meters per carry being high, so you go deeper in the phase count. So it's like having a live drill practice where it's still a proper test match. I'm not demeaning anyone, but it does give you the ability to see work rate. So Ben Jason Dixon was the big winner of the Boks test. You saw that he was like the Peter Steph du Toit like for like. And then you saw a guy like Ruas fade a little bit. So you think, well, maybe we are telling something, because the hard thing about gauging someone's skill for the Wallabies or the New Zealand or Springboks against a really proper test is there really isn't any space. So you don't even know what someone could do. I think the All Blacks did a lot of fact finding. They had 5 or 6 rookies, and several.
And they all did pretty well.
Did look, and Fiji may not have been very organized, but they're still a physical team.
Yeah, and I think you can actually say the same thing about Australia. Joe Schmidt tried, I reckon he's debuted 4 or 5 players already, and all of them, I think, did pretty well. Jeremy Williams, we spoke about several times through the July test. He was really good. Looked like he belonged at test level, and that's about the best compliment you can give to a new player. I think the big takeaways for the Wallabies is that whoever they end up playing at 6, they've found a back row combination that is going to be world class. Yeah. And I think you can say that in Dangunu and Kellaway and Wright, they've found a back 3 combination that works really well as well. And there's a bit of surprise in my voice in saying that, because I didn't have Filippo Dangunu penciled in to be in the back row combination.
I think Joe might have found his trios, and that's interesting too.
Yeah,
I laid down the Tri Nations results and kind of saw what are anomalies. What leapt out at me is that Joe Schmidt is back to his ways of, I don't like offloads. The Boks had 17 offloads, Australia 7, but number of passes 229 for the Wallabies. That's a lot. So
and
short
again,
tip.
Yeah. Watching it again on Sunday, the number of little short passes, little tip-on passes. And as I said on Saturday night, it just allowed them to get outside the next defender, and all of a sudden maybe they're attacking the 3rd defender instead of the 1.5 gap. So that was really good to see. Do go back and find our second edition of Test Match Post-Mortem for the weekend. Harry and my full-time focus on the Wallabies win over Georgia, and also the All Blacks defeat of Fiji. Major League Rugby Conference semi-finals Saturday and Sunday, and I've got a word for you: boilovers. Holy moly. So first semi-finals on Saturday in the Eastern Conference, New England beat Old Glory 33-29. That wasn't so much of a surprise. But in the Western Conference, the Dallas Jackals 34 beat the goddamn Houston Sabercats 22. That was first against 4th, and the Sabercats are gone. On Sunday, Nola Gold went down to Chicago, 45-21. That was 2nd against 3rd. And then Seattle, that was the Eastern semi-final. Seattle in the West beat San Diego 30 points to 28. That's their 2nd consecutive pretty tight win from memory. So some really interesting results. So conference finals next weekend. New England playing Chicago on Saturday. Seattle against Dallas on Sunday. So some interesting conference finals coming up next week.
God bless Texas. Now we can support the Texas team. I actually was really surprised with that. That was a surprise, probably the biggest shock in MLR in the whole season, because the Sabercats had been sailing.
They'd been cruising, hadn't they? Yeah, they really had. And we'll be back later in the week with another edition of Games of the Week, our end of week preview. And there's not really much rugby to preview anymore. We won't just talk about Major League Rugby. We'll also take a bit of a look back at the lessons learned, I think, from these July tests. So do make sure you've liked, followed, subscribed, and you will not miss that when it drops. The couple of big headlines from the last 7 days to wrap up a great episode 24, mate. Queensland, having just beaten Wales last weekend, will continue their international tour game portion of the season. They're in Tonga this weekend, taking on the Kingdom in Nuku'alofa. And then they'll actually extend their relationship with the Panasonic Wild Knights with a tour to Japan in October, November this year. They'll play a full cap fixture against the Wild Knights in November after a bit of a warm-up game, so a bit of a preseason game as well for both of them, and they've been doing that for a few years. The big news item over the weekend, Adi Savia to Moana Pacifica for the next 3 seasons. It's enormous. And I said this on Twitter, this is going to be a genuine game changer for Moana. It's enormous.
Also, Artie will add a hyphenated surname to his surname. Prediction, mark it down.
Yeah, could well do.
You go play Pacifica, you always add a hyphen. You always do.
Yeah, look, it's gonna. I've read. I learned. I've learned just in the last day or so that there's been a change of ownership within Moana, but now they land, the reigning World Player of the Year.
It's kind
this
of
is a marquee player to
unprecedented.
build a team around. Oh, it's huge in terms of Super
Like,
Rugby.
there's not any example of someone at that level going to what is, I'm not, demeaning the Moana, but they really had a struggling.
Yeah.
You are in the meeting now.
Oh, that was nice of you. Yeah.
Interesting.
Are we being live streamed right now?
What is happening? I'm gonna kill that. Hold on.
I don't know. No, I've thought about this statement, and I've thought about it so many times that it's almost impossible to not think of it as hyperbole. But I think this could make Super Rugby Pacific. That's how big an impact this could be.
It does put bums in the seats. You always wondered about Moana Pacifica. They were just kind of a couple of really good players away. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, yep. They just need to nail down a home base now. And Springbok coach Rassie Erasmus confirmed on Monday that Pieter-Steph du Toit has made a miracle recovery and that Stephen Kitchoff has been cleared to play Australia as well. Their names will appear on the touring squad that he's going to announce as soon as Tuesday. Potentially, it could have already happened by the time you're listening to this, which is a long way out from the Rugby Championship.
Pieter-Steph just went back to the farm where he's a farmer, and he farmed, and he made himself a new limb, and he's fine.
Where he doesn't farm when he's in Japan?
Yes. Remember that discussion. He's not a proper farmer because he's not there all the time.
Farm. He's not in Japan. Do you have a final thought for the week, mate?
I like the stories of rugby. I think we have a sport which has the most interesting people. If you're willing to dig in there and delve, there's some fantastically smart and interesting people. So I just love the idea that there's people out there telling that story, more of it. I know it's what we're trying to do, and in our own little way. So definitely let's all tell our stories.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, that is episode 24 of the 8-9 Combo done. Go and check the show notes for links to the 8-9 Combo on Twitter and YouTube, where you'll find video versions of the podcast every week. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places at Harry Bordy Jones and at BMC Sport. And you'll find links on our socials for Harry's written work on the Raw a couple of times a month and my weekly Australian columns on Rugby Pass, which this week is going to include a feature with former Wallabies captain James Horwell on the 2013 Lions series memories, which I've enjoyed so much putting together. So that'll be out later this week. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And we'll be back in your ears in a few days' time with Games of the Week.
This is the 8-9 Combo podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones.